Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you this morning. It's a little chilly this morning when I walked outside.
Still got on short sleeve shirt.
Well, it's not below zero yet.
Well, that's good.
You have to remember, I was raised in the mountains of western North Carolina, so it gets cold up there. So when it gets below zero, it's cold. So I got kind of thick skin, so. But yeah, it was a little chillier this morning than I initially expected, but
Sure was.
that was okay. It's supposed to be even chillier tonight than it was last night. So anyway, it's
I like it because we don't need heat, we don't need air conditioning. I feel like I'm beating the power company out of something.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
well, I had to turn the heat on last night. So
Chilly this morning, I thought.
Yeah, I
I
got
showered.
it's 42 degrees this morning.
so it's okay. It's October and it's supposed to start getting chilly, and that's okay. And so forth.
You'll warm up again.
I guess most of you heard about what's going on in Israel.
Yep.
2006, when I was in Odvok, Poland, on a mission trip, there was a gentleman there from Israel that I met named Mikhail, and please forgive my pronunciation, but something close to that I met. And him and I worked together, and he taught me how to read the headstones.
The what?
The headstones in the Jewish
Oh,
cemetery.
headstones, right.
They're written in a particular language, and he taught me how to read the headstones. And anyway, and we have been friends. It's now 17 years. And I heard from him last night, and things are not good in Israel. So it was interesting that he took the time to sit down and wrote me an email last night and sent it to me, and so let's remember the folks in Israel and what's going on there. It's Bible prophecy coming
True.
true in our lifetime. And one other thing about Bible prophecy is most of y'all know on Wednesday, if you have a smartphone, you got an alert.
Yep,
Yeah.
sure did.
Yep, sure did. Everybody got an alert.
Yep, busted you.
Back in 2015, they passed a law every 3 years you would do this alert. Well, what most people don't know is in Russia, on the same day at the same time, they had a national alert go out to all of their people. So things are getting kind of interesting now as we progress along and you see little things going on, little bits and pieces, begin to
Pretty big
wonder.
things going on sometimes.
Yeah, 5,000 missiles is not little, is it?
So, I think things are happening at a somewhat fast pace. I think as these things are going on, this is going on, this is going on, and it's like, okay, this is, we need to be aware of what's going on and get ready. It's we don't know what's going to happen next, and I found it interesting that all of this is going on and people are sitting back and they're wondering, well, what's going to happen next? And I don't know, but it's things are going to get worse and worse and worse. So we just need to be aware and be vigilant, and watch and pray. So we've got the Calvary Refuge Center coming up in November, so let's, continue to think about what we want to do. Yes, Gary?
It's also the same night we have family conference, and we're presenting the budget, so I won't be able to go with that. So if we decide to serve, if we don't serve and just gonna drop it off, I can probably go, but anyway.
Okay.
On that, but mentioning that, last Wednesday night here at the church, we had rice and some kind of a mixture.
Poppy seed chicken,
What was it?
poppy seed.
Yeah, poppy seed chicken. It was really good, and they kept saying how easy it is to make. So that might be a suggestion on making it. The only drawback is the church is going to be using the ovens if we have conference that night. So it'd have to be cooked at home or something. But it was. They said it's real easy to make, but it was really delicious.
Yeah, Brooke made that.
You say it was really
Who made
good,
it?
huh?
Brooke? Okay, then I know where the recipe comes from.
Yeah, yeah, Brooke and Kim were in there, so.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Gary,
that's my daughter's son.
you say it was really good?
It was excellent.
Well,
Yeah.
we was thinking about coming and changed our minds at the last minute, so I won't mention that to Gracie.
Oh, no.
But anyway, the only reason I brought that up is they were talking about how simple it was to make. Now, I'm not much of a cook for rice, but I could probably cook the other part. But anyway, that's something to think about, or we can hire a couple of those women to make it for us. Just
That's a
thought.
good idea, right there.
Yeah, Brooke and Kim.
You got the inside track.
I do.
Well, maybe if Gary approaches it the right way, we might be able to get a discount.
Pans they used were really good, and probably 2 of those size pans would feed the group, and then we could put salad and bread and some
Yeah.
dessert with it. So,
Well, like I said, let's keep thinking about it and coming up with ideas so it doesn't creep up on us here. It's already October, and time is fleeting by. And before you know it, it'll be November, and
Does it keep getting faster just because we're old, or is everybody else getting that faster?
I think it only gets fast to us because my grandkids seem to think it's forever.
That's what I mean, I think it's got a lot to do with.
Yeah. So I don't,
Me anyway.
anyway, it seems really fast to me too, but I don't know, my oldest granddaughter says it takes forever. So, and she's 14, so, it's interesting, your perception of time. And
The
so,
other thing I'd like to bring up is we need to kind of get together as a group again, and I'm kind of looking at the 27th, that's on a Friday, if that's okay with everybody, and maybe have a soup night like we did once before, because the problem is, in November, we go back on time, and it'd be dark by the time everybody gets off, so this way, it'd still be daylight enough, everybody can drive home. So it's something to consider there, if we're gonna have a social, to get together here.
okay,
I'll check and make sure that date's available, if that's agreeable with everybody.
And Gracie says I'm the worst driver in the world right now, so I can drive it now.
Well, we can always manage to have
I
it
think
picked
that
up.
yellow lineman straddle it.
but, yeah, we can keep tossing that around.
That's 2 weeks, so. Anyway. Just a
Okay.
thought, just a thought.
Okay. Well, everybody sort of think about it, and we'll try to put some parameters around it next Sunday and come up with some, people think about what kind of soup you want to make.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a soup, I just know that's pretty easy for everybody.
Well, I was getting ready to say, it's something that doesn't take a lot of time. just, and, get your crock pot out and cook it and bring it and serve it.
Yeah.
So that's like, I agree with you.
Soup and salad, yeah.
You have soup and salad and maybe some kind of crackers to go with it.
Cornbread.
Oh, yes.
Cornbread, yeah.
Crackers.
Crackers and cornbread.
Linda love the cornbread. I don't eat it. But anyway.
Really?
You Yankee.
It's dry. That's probably the reason. It's just cornbread dry.
Oh,
I had it
cornbread.
somewhere, one time it was really moist. I was really impressed with it. That's the only time I've ever found it that way, but
That's that
yeah.
jiffy cornbread.
That falls right in there with biscuits. I don't eat biscuits either. They're dry. I mean,
I
I'll
like the
eat one.
Mexican cornbread.
I'll eat
Oh, I
some.
love biscuits
yeah.
and cornbread.
I like
But
Mexican
okay.
cornbread if it's
You know, there's a big difference between Yankee cornbread and Southern cornbread.
And you don't eat cornbread.
Yankee cornbread tastes like cake. When Nancy used to make it and give it to people, they'd say, "That's not cornbread, that's cake."
That's the kind I would like.
I don't like the kind that has the sugar in it. That's not real cornbread. You gonna make cake, make cake. You gonna make cornbread.
Now Betty, I will say, she's famous for her cornbread.
Oh, I love Betty English cornbread. That's good stuff.
Good crackling cornbread.
Crackling cornbread, boy, that's good too. Yeah,
I think I never heard of that one.
But,
They just put crackling in
What's crackling?
it. It's like pig's
Pig
skin,
skin?
something like that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's all kinds of renditions of that from over the years. So.
Yankee tell me he didn't like to eat that grit.
That would be me.
I thought so.
I don't eat no grits
One
either.
of them grits, where'd you get them grit anyway?
Oh yeah. I took a bag of grits to Concord, New Hampshire. I had to go up to New Hampshire to a school, and I took a bag with me and tried to get the guy in the restaurant to cook it. He wouldn't have nothing to do with it. So I understand. Anyway, let's be thinking about, getting together on Friday, October the 27th for soup, light meal, and cornbread, and what other fixings. Think about it. We'll try to put some parameters around it next Sunday and so forth, and we'll go with that. So anyway, our lesson today is out of the 7th chapter of the book of Luke. But before we get there, I want to sort of get the premises here for what's going on. I have with me one of the books from my library. It's written by 2 Jewish rabbis. And this is all the information comes out of the first 5 books of Moses, which is the first 5 books in the Bible. And, most of us, we think of commandments, we think of the 10 commandments. Well, in Jewish thought, there's 613 commandments. And the Jewish rabbis or Jewish Pharisees were responsible for these 613 commandments, knowing what they are, and are they applicable at all times or only during temple time? Were the commandments applicable anywhere in the world where a Jew might live, or only in the land of Israel? And to whom the commandments apply? Was it to men above the age of 13, to women above the age of 12, or all Jewish men and women above the age of 13 and 12, respectively. So these Pharisees knew all this stuff. They had been trained over the years to know all this information about the 613 commandments. So you sit here and you think, these are pretty well educated people. And yet, Jesus comes on the scene and they don't know, they can't figure out who he is. So it's very interesting as we go through this, you know, how much training and knowledge these Pharisees had, yet they didn't know who Jesus was. So in our optional home study, I ask in Luke chapter 5, verse 17 to 26, the Pharisees accused Jesus of what?
Blasphemy.
Right. They accused Jesus of blasphemy. Because only God can forgive sin. And they said he's blasphemy. And Luke chapter 5, verse 27, what was he accused of?
Eating and drinking with publicans.
Right. Now what's a publican?
Taxpayer
Taxpayer.
or collector,
I mean, tax collector. We all pay taxes, but he was a tax collector. That's what Matthew was. One of the disciples. Then we go on down in Luke chapter 5, verse 33. What's he accused of?
His disciples eating and drinking and others fasted.
Right. In other words, when you're supposed to be fasting, your disciples are not fasting. And if you understand the Jewish rabbi, the rabbi was to teach his followers, and they felt like Jesus had not properly taught his disciples when they were supposed to be fasting. So they were accusing Jesus, you know, you're not teaching your followers very good. So they were blaspheming about that. Then we move up to Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 5. What's Jesus, the accusation against Jesus?
Observing the Sabbath.
Right, they weren't observing the Sabbath. And as you well know, you can't do anything on the Sabbath. Really. You cook the day before and you eat leftovers. And you don't walk more than a half a mile. And there's all kinds of restrictions.
630 or whatever it was, over 600. I don't see how you do anything other than breathe. Breaking the law.
That's right. So, you know, we have to realize, you know, there was a lot of accusation that's going on between Luke chapter 5 and then in Luke chapter 6, beginning in verse 6 through 11, what was Jesus accused of?
Healing on the Sabbath.
Healing on the Sabbath. Again, breaking a rule for what you can do on the Sabbath. Now, if you read these commandments, if your ox gets stuck in the ditch on the Sabbath, you're allowed to get the ox out of the ditch and take it home. But you can't heal somebody on the Sabbath. So there's not a lot of, let's say, common sense here. if you've ever seen an ox, they're pretty large animals. And if he gets stuck in the ditch, it's going to take some real work to get him out.
Hopefully it's within a half a mile. Half a mile.
So there's not, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what Jesus is dealing with at his time. So just remember, there's 613 commandments. The Pharisees know them all. Between Luke chapter 5 and chapter 6 so far, he's dealt with 5 different accusations. Now we're in Luke chapter 7, and we're picking up with the Pharisees once again. And notice in verse 36 of Luke chapter 7, it says, "Then one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him." Now, that in itself sort of raises a flag. Why did the Pharisee, who they've been accusing him up until now, and now they ask him to come and eat with him? So, it's very interesting where that, how all that come about. And he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat. Okay, so he says, okay, I'm going to go to the Pharisee's house and I'm going to sit down and eat with him. Jesus did not, stay away from these folks. He was trying to work with these folks and teach them who he was and that they needed the law, but not their law. They needed God's law. And he's trying to work with these. He's worked with them, he's working with them, and now he's going to go eat with them. In verse 37, "And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner." Now, it is assumed that this woman was a prostitute. We don't know. It doesn't tell us, other than she's a sinner and it's a woman, and it's sort of assumed that she is.
Just about any time in the Bible it mentions a woman being a sinner, it's either that or she's having an affair, one or the other.
Right. When she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, now, not sure, evidently when Jesus walked around, news traveled fast. Everybody was texting right off the bat, getting the information out. But anyway, she finds out Jesus is at this particular Pharisee's house, and we learn later on in the text here, the Pharisee's name is Simon, which is a very common name during this time period, but his name is Simon. And this woman brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil. Now, we don't know exactly what kind of oil. There's all kinds of speculation, but it was something that smelled nice. So this lady comes in and she brings this flask. And now everybody in this area knows who this woman is and what she does. So it's like she comes in this house with this flask of oil. Now, it's interesting how, she decides this, just all of a sudden she's going to do this. So she realizes who Jesus is, and as we see later, the Pharisee doesn't. and stood at his feet behind him, weeping. So she's weeping now. And she began to wash his feet with her tears. So now, she's going down, she's bending down and washing Jesus' feet with her tears. Now, as custom in this time, a lot of times when visitors would come, they walked, the roads were dusty, and the people of the house would wash their feet as a kind gesture, because your feet are hot, they're probably tired and dirty, and you wash your feet.
They wore open sandals.
Yes, they didn't have tennis shoes. They wore open-toed shoes, just like a lot of people do today, wear sandals. And that was sort of common in that time period, and your feet would get dusty and dirty. So they would wash their feet. She's washing the feet of Jesus with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. She didn't have a towel. She didn't bring a basin of water, so she's using her hair to wipe his feet. And she kissed his feet and anointed them with the fragrant oil. So she comes in, she washes his feet with her tears, dries it, and then she takes this fragrant oil and rubs it on his feet. Verse 39, now when the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he spoke to himself, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what manner of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. So Luke here is telling us what this man is thinking. This Pharisee, who we know will soon learn his name Simon. Jesus, if he was a prophet, he'd know who this woman is. In verse 40, and Jesus answered and said to him. Now Simon is thinking this, but he hasn't spoken yet. But Jesus knows the thoughts. And he says, Simon, I have something to say to you. So he said, teacher, say it. The word teacher is another name for rabbi, who one of the things that rabbis did was teach. And he says, go ahead and say it. He said, verse 41, there was a certain creditor who had two debtors. One owed him 5 denarii and the other 50. And when they had nothing with which to repay, he freely forgave them both. So you got two people that are in debt, one for 500, the other is 50. Now, if you do a little bit of math, you can figure out one owes 10 times what the other does. So that's a pretty significant difference here. And the creditor gives them both. And Jesus asked the man, Simon says, tell me therefore, which of them will love him more? So he says, you got two guys, one owes 500, one owes 50. Who's going to love him the most? And Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. He says the guy that forgave him, 500, is going to love him more. And he said to him, you have rightly judged. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon. Now, Jesus has been focused on Simon. Now he's looking at the woman, but he's actually speaking to Simon. He says, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet. Customary thing, for travelers, that washing of feet. He said, you didn't put a basin of water for me, but she washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of his head. So Jesus is saying, this is going on. You didn't do this, but this woman whom you say is a sinner has done all of these things for me. Verse 45, you gave me no kiss, which if you know the culture, they, will come in and greet each other with a friendship kiss. This is not anything that is from the culture, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. So this, you didn't come in and greet me with a kiss, but this woman has been kissing my feet since I got here. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Well, he says, you didn't even, anoint me, and yet this woman has done this. Therefore, I say to you, her sins, which are many. Now, Jesus is acknowledging this lady has a sin problem. He's not discounting it. He's not throwing it aside. He's acknowledging it to her. And remember now, he's looking at her, but he's talking to Simon, the Pharisee, and he said, which are many, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. So he's telling Simon the Pharisee, this woman has a lot of sins, and she understands it, and she has come to me seeking forgiveness, but you haven't done anything. You haven't done a thing. This is, I think, the sort of brings out the thought of the saint versus the sinner. We have the one guy, the Pharisee Simon, who thinks he's the saint, and this lady comes in who is the sinner, and at the end of the story, sort of the roles get reversed. She becomes the saint and Simon becomes the sinner. It's interesting how it rolls through this. Then in verse 48, then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. Wow. Once again, as we talked about before in Luke 5, we talked about the Pharisees accusing him of blasphemy, since only God can forgive sins. Yet here in Luke 7, he's forgiving sins again. And in verse 49, and those who sat at the table with him began to say to themselves, "Who is this whom even forgives sin?" Once again, they began to question, who is Jesus? By what authority can he forgive sins? And that's a constant theme we see by the religious leaders of Jesus' time is he's forgiving sins. And that means, only God can forgive sins. They don't understand who Jesus is. Yet, with all their education and knowing all 613 laws and the first 5 books of Moses, they don't know who Jesus is. But yet this sinner, this prostitute comes in and realizes who Jesus is and is saved. And in verse 50, then he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." So we see here that Jesus says, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." This woman realized who Jesus was and went and ministered to him. And because of what she did, she was saved. Have you, in your adult life, have you ever been put in a position where you felt ashamed of Jesus, or that you were a Christian? Yeah, I'm sure some of us in our adult life have been in situations where we were ashamed of being called a Christian, being called the term a goody two shoes, such thing. It happens. But this lady went into a Pharisee's house, and we already talked about the credentials of a Pharisee, and yet this lady went in this house, a prostitute who everybody knew, obviously, from the text here in Luke, that she was a prostitute, and yet she went in and ministered to Jesus, yet the Pharisee did not. So we see here that it started out the saint and the sinner, and then by the end of the text, it appears that the saint and sinner reversed roles. And it's so easy to do, get caught up in things and realize that, it's the little things in life that matter and not the big things. All she did was treat him the way it was customary in that time, is to wash his feet. She dried them with her hair, and then she put oil on his feet, anointed him. Customary thing, and she did it, yet the Pharisee, who knew the customs of the day, didn't do anything other than invite him to eat. And yet they questioned who he was. Yet again, because they did so in Luke chapter 5, and now in Luke chapter 7, they're again questioning who can forgive sins. Only God can. And they don't see Jesus as the Son of God.
If they knew who he was, they would have the faith that she had, and he'd forgive them too.
Yes. That's exactly right. And yet, with all of the knowledge that they have, they still didn't understand who Jesus was.
I'd probably guess that most Pharisees probably thought they never sinned to start with.
Oh, that's true, because they kept the law.
Yeah.
All 613 of them.
How were all of those laws, where they come from to start with? How did who told
They came from the first 5 books of Moses.
I don't know about other people other than myself, but I've been in church ever since I was in the younger 20s. And in the early days, I never ever talk about it, but as I get older and older and older, I find it much easier to enter the church or a scripture into a conversation than I ever did before. You know, I can tell people a verse of scripture or something if it fits the situation. For instance, what's going over in Israel, I might say something about that. Well, you know, that's coming here too. Just don't think it's not. It is. You know, it's going to go on. Coming down. A long time ago, I'd never seen nothing about it at all.
Right.
You were talking about that disaster signal. It was simultaneous with one in Israel, you said earlier.
No, Russia.
Oh, Russia, I'm sorry. And First Baptist Jonesboro is having disaster training tomorrow and Tuesday. And it's going to be a huge operation. Huge.
Yes, there are several churches in Georgia that are going to have disaster training throughout the month of October because of what's going on. People are beginning to realize that things are happening and it's not good. It's going to get worse, and people are beginning to react to what's going on. And I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, you can't just wake up one morning and say, hey, what do I do now?
Well, in other words, at your house, Mary Jo, you and Joel may have a plan that fits your family, but we as a church family
Need one.
need one because we need to help people like you and Dick and Grace and Miss Bunny and Miss Betty. You know, we need to help these people. We don't need, you know, they can have their wonderful little plan, but we as a church need to be able to help them as well. You know, and identify these people where they are in case something does happen. I agree. It's, you know, it's, times are
I'm glad you're
different.
having it. I had planned actually to be there. This
You go
next
back
week,
about 50 years or so,
but I'm not going to be able to now.
you'll find that people that didn't even go to church still believed in Jesus, and now you don't know what they believe in. You know?
That's true. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different beliefs. And it's interesting. You know, where are the non-believers? What are they going to do when disaster hits?
I woke up Saturday morning and there was no power. I turned the lights on and off several times and before I got it, you know, hey, there is no power in this house.
Yeah, my, there's been a
So I went over to Wendy's and got breakfast. And I asked the girl at the window, I said, do you know if something's going on with the power? Because you never know if it's just you or if it's the whole neighborhood.
Right.
But and Joel says, what's this, no electricity? I said, yeah, no electricity. When's it coming? I don't know. When it decides to.
You really realize how dependent you are on electricity until you lose it.
Yeah, sit there and.
Like at my
sit
house,
there
we
and-
don't have a well anymore either.
Why? What happened?
No, thanks to you.
No, I'm talking about when you lose power.
Oh.
Lose power because I'm on a well,
Oh,
run by electricity.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
Nothing happened to that well, I'm depending on it.
Luckily, I
Okay.
still have gas.
And it was something.
So I still had a
We'll put
water
a bucket down
hydrant.
there.
But the scary part about Hampton, we were going, Glenn and I were going to one of the kids' ball games, and the traffic lights were out there where Wendy's is.
Yeah.
Traffic light was out there, and then down there across from the raceway. But you've got, 4 lanes going instead of just 4 separate lanes. You got 8 lanes going now. I mean, it was like it's my turn type thing, and the amazing amount of people that don't stop. When the lights out, the law is that you treat it as a 4-way stop.
Correct.
But it's amazing the amount of people didn't stop, And it was that turning off of right there at Wendy's to go north on 1941 was pretty slow, a little nerve wracking right there.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's
So,
nerve wracking just for, to be a few hours or maybe even a day without power. But think about if the whole power grid went down, and who knows how long it would be.
It'd be
A lot of people would not make it.
It'd be really easy because when I come, we got a major power station right across the street here. That you see
Right.
all the big
Right.
power things. And I hear about terrorists, doing things, and I thought, how easy it'd be to take that out. All you'd have to do is have a long log chain, and sling it, makes contact with 2 of those things. It's gonna blow transformers, and
Oh, yeah.
it'd take a while to fix all that. So we have a tendency to be a little relaxed on stuff, and the cybersecurity now, because all this stuff is run by computer systems. So, it's hacking, one of the biggest fears that they have is that hackers will be able to come in and shut down the pumps that pump the cooling waters into the cooling towers for your nuclear power plants. So, it's
Well, your car won't work either, will it?
Not if it's power.
yeah, it should work. Your car should work.
Gas.
Not your electric car.
But
well, if you have an electric car now and you have to plug it into the outlet and you ain't got no power, then you ain't got no car.
How long does it take to charge those things up?
It depends.
12 hours.
I mean, you go into a gas station, you have to get in line, so what do you do if you go into an electric place and you got 50 cars ahead of you?
Well, they can charge. If you just plug it into 110, it takes like 24 hours, 22 hours. You have a charger there, a 220 type charger, like he said, you're looking at 10 to 12 hours to charge it. That's to 80%, probably 12 a little longer for 100%. But if you got a supercharger, it can do it in 45 minutes. The funny part is they have these superchargers stationed out different places, and they have a giant diesel generator running the supercharger. And I thought, it's a kind of a little oxymoron here, I saw that not too long ago. Great big old generator running through the supercharger.
They have one of those great Caterpillar generator things
Yep.
sitting up there,
Yep.
and it's running on diesel fuel, and you're sitting here making electricity for these electric cars, and I'm like, okay, but
Anyway, I'm off subject, sorry. about
anyway, that's okay. We're in trying times, and we need, we sit here and we kind of laugh about some of this stuff, but it's actually really serious. It really is.
I personally think that the church ought to, and I haven't even voiced this, but I think the church should have water, lots of water stored, and maybe lots of canned goods, just for survival. Our community, our church members, in case they haven't done it themselves.
But basically, the individuals should do that, because here's the problem you get into. If you
But
store a lot of that
runs
stuff
out.
there,
Yeah.
Somebody else
and
comes over
if somebody needs it and they know it's there, they're gonna come after it. That's gonna be the big thing. If you're set up for self-survival, you don't wanna be telling nobody about it, because they know well, I can go to her house, she's got that stuff, and they'll do whatever they have to do to get it. But right now, people will rob you over 50 cents in your billfold. You know, they won't hesitate to rob you over food or water.
Oh, correct you. When things change, you know, people become more and more desperate, and they will take more, and the more desperate they get, the more chances they take. And it's the world that we live in, and we just need to realize, you know, where we live and the world we live in, and work around that accordingly. But yeah, there are several churches that are doing disaster things throughout the month of October, just because they want to take care of the people in the church and the people in the community. And I think that's very nice.
So nothing else to educate them.
Right.
Well, a little
I
preparation is
hadn't
better
heard that
than
about
none.
that, so.
A little is better than none.
Yeah, I
Yes.
hadn't heard about them doing that teaching, so.
Yeah, they're doing that at Jonesboro First Baptist, so, yeah.
I remember one class
Yeah,
was
go
like
now.
Right.
$40
That's
to
what I
take
tell
the
you,
class or something.
my grandmother taught me to pray when I was a little boy. Now I lay me down to sleep, but Nancy and I never went to church till after we were married. But she never ever taught me to pray in Jesus' name. I don't know what the difference, but I still pray now. I lay me down to sleep in her name. I think that much of her. I gotta go get Chris.
Okay, I understand, Dick. But anyway, remember, we need have faith, trust in God. And that's what this woman did. And her faith saved her, and she was allowed to leave and go in peace. And folks, that's what we need to realize, is that we need to trust God, have faith, and we can live in peace, just like this woman left the Pharisee's house in peace, knowing that she's going to be with Jesus. And folks, this is one of the people we're going to see in heaven, this young lady. She's going to be there, and she'll be there with us, with her sins forgiven. Anybody have any other comments on our lesson? I think we just need to realize something simple: faith and trust. Okay.
The other thing, we need to pay attention to what's going on in Israel, because it's not only a matter of time before it happens here.
Correct. And
911, 9/11 could happen in Atlanta or Hampton.
sure.
We don't know what the underworld is cooking up, but it's gonna happen.
Yes, it is. Read Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah.
What about this Psalm 83? I want to ask you about that. Psalms 83, I hear that thrown around. The Psalm 83 war, which would be not the Ezekiel war, but before.
That's for your daughter.
She's in Utah.